it feels, even though it's the most adventurous type of expedition I've ever been part of, because it's so remote and we're like there all by ourselves, but everything is just well prepared. There is a risk assessment in place. We have all the protective gear. We have all the first aid kit and the training. So we are truly basically relying on each other with our lives, but very safely so, because everybody is just in the right mindset and in the right, condition and type of training. And so everything is, works like clockwork, actually.
Sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um podcast aqui do Maré Sonora, e o episódio de hoje foi gravado em inglês. Para quem prefere ouvir esse episódio com legenda traduzida automaticamente para o português, é só acessar o bate-papo diretamente na plataforma YouTube. Lá você tem um recurso, acessa a legenda, escolhe para português e aproveita a conversa de hoje. Um abraço e até mais! Welcome to Maré Sonora podcast. In English, you can translate it as Restaurant Tide. As you know, it's a show about inspiring stories somehow related to the ocean. And today I have a very, very nice guest. We met a few months ago, actually a year ago, right? And
1 year ago.
She's in Germany. She's going to talk a little bit more. Welcome to the show, Nicole. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you, Marina. Thanks for the nice introduction and for inviting me here. I'm very honored to be a guest in your podcast. Thank you.
You do a very, very cool job, and you do science through very challenging expeditions. I really think it's nice to talk to scientists in general and show how difficult it is to do their job, and so you can get to make people closer to science through a human approach. If you can introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know you, just talk a bit about your job, how you chose your profession, and then we can start later.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Nicole Richter. I'm from Germany and also right now based in Germany. I've been studying volcanoes for about the past 15 years now already. And the road to becoming a volcanologist wasn't very straightforward. I actually started off with studying geography in my bachelor's degree, and I focused on satellite imagery, studying any changes of the Earth's surface. And doing my master's later, I got more and more interested in applying a certain type of satellite imagery to look at small-scale deformation of the surface. We're talking about centimeter-scale displacements that happen in a coherent way. And the most intriguing application for this method, I thought, were volcanoes. I started actually applying it to earthquakes, but when we look at earthquakes, we see the majority of the displacement after the event has happened. But with volcanoes, we actually see when pressurization happens. So basically the volcano kind of grows a little bit like an air balloon and lifts up the surface. So the surface moves closer to the satellite sensor, and this we can detect. And therefore we can actually look at pressurizing volcanic systems before they erupt. And the first time I got to apply this was doing my master thesis that I got a scholarship for to go to Hawaii with. So I went to Hawaii for my master thesis and worked at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. And after months and months of writing my thesis, I submitted my thesis on March 1st, and on March 5th, the volcano erupted. So this was the very first time I witnessed a volcanic eruption. And not only didn't I have to change anything in my master thesis because it was out already and submitted, but I also had time to go to do field work. So I jumped on a helicopter first thing in the morning after the eruption began and we were basically playing with the lava fountains all day long. And this captured me so much that after that date, there was no other application for me for the next 10, 15 years now. So I was basically chasing volcanoes and looking at surface deformation from space, but also then extended the whole science field to volcanic hazards, the study of lava flows, and the study of the internal architecture of volcanic edifices and their stability. So, long story short, I'm a trained remote sensing person, applying satellite imagery to any change on the surface, but I've only ever applying it to active volcanoes because this is where my heart is.
And speaking for those non-specialists out there like myself, so once you submitted your thesis going back to Hawaii, just a little bit jump in the past again before we talk about South Georgia where we met. Tell us about the practical use, because once you submit your thesis and then you went into field work, how was the work and what use could you make of it, and how was the post work once the erosion had happened? What did you do exactly? Just tell us about this.
So in my thesis, I used that satellite method, and I used a German satellite system and a Swiss software to process this type of satellite data. This is basically how I got in, because I was trained in a software that the observatory used, and I was German, basically very close to the German Space Agency, who basically operates these satellites to deliver the data. And I was basically capable of applying it to volcanoes. So this is what got me in, and I looked at the data in close detail. I processed these interferograms, and I basically saw how the surface was inflating. So basically the volcano was pressurizing. So we did see a signal that indicated a few centimeters of surface motion towards the sensors. So we were on alert already. And then starting in early January, maybe late December, we also started feeling earthquakes, and the degassing changed. And the combination of all these changes in the measurements of the volcanic activity basically led us to the conclusion that if these trends continue, so increased seismicity, uplift of the surface, and changes in degassing, that a change in volcanic activity, meaning a possible eruption, could occur in the weeks or months to come. And this was basically the conclusion in the thesis already. So basically I delivered the satellite measurements of the uplift and said, well, in combination with all the other measures, this could indicate an elevated activity level of this volcano. And then sure enough, 5 days after the submission, the volcano erupted. So I was very, very lucky. There was an exceptional timing also because before the use of this German satellite system, we had like this European satellite system in place. It's an old satellite, Envisat, a big one. And it was used as a workhorse for years and years to monitor surface deformation in Hawaii. But because it was basically running out of fuel to correct its orbit, the measurement became less and less accurate for this type of application. So we couldn't trust the deformation measurements of this satellite anymore just because it was an old satellite. So we had to shift to another system. And just by pure coincidence, at that time being, it was a German satellite system. And I was trained in using that type of data. So it was very lucky that the timing of the shift from one satellite system to another happened, that I was trained in the correct software, that I actually got this internship and also the scholarship to work at the observatory at the time. And also, coincidentally, the volcano had a very active phase, and that basically culminated in an eruption later on.
With the information that you presented in your studies on your thesis, did it help for them to do something to prevent something, or was it too soon? Like 5 days is very, very soon, I mean, short time? Or did it contribute for any preparation or in like practical terms or not in this time?
Well, the satellite imagery is only basically an additional information to all the other information the monitoring network on the ground actually gives the scientists at the observatory. So basically, there's also GNSS sensors in like installed in the field that give that type of information as well. But the GNSS sensors, they only look at the surface displacement at their location. So they have a three-dimensional location, right? Or they give their location in 3 dimensions, but only at the point where they're located. While the satellite has an area-wide view of the deformation pattern. So it gives more of a spatial context of the displacement pattern, which then allows us to look at the source of this displacement. So it did deliver additional information, although the pre-warning signals, because this is such a well-instrumentalized volcano, would have been recorded by the dense network that is installed on the ground likewise. So the scientists were warned on basically many levels because of the monitoring system that's in place. But it did deliver additional information that would, just contribute to the whole picture.
And how long did it last? The eruption like started? Did it last for a few hours or shorter? How was the eruption itself?
It lasted for 6 days until March 11.
Wow.
And this was also a very interesting timing because it was a short-lived eruption in general. Started basically with the collapse of a crater on the eastern flank of the volcano. So it also erupted in an area where there is no houses, no people live there. Wow. Nothing is at risk, no infrastructure, and also no property, no human life either. So it's really a remote location, but it's on the eastern flank of the volcano, and this place has been active for a long time, or had been active before, like activity changed until today. But it started with Pu'u'o collapsing, which is the name of the crater, and then a fissure opening kilometers long, where there is a lava fountain, basically, or a curtain of lava fountains shooting out of this fissure in the ground, like this opening crack in the ground. And then basically the eruption would focus on 2 main vents that built cinder cones and fed lava flows that were basically distributed along this flow field. And then the end of the eruption basically happened a few days later. Basically, the fountains died off. And on March 11, the eruption was declared over. But if you remember the date, March 11, 2011, that was exactly the date of the large Tohoku earthquake happening in Japan, the one that caused the Fukushima crisis and lots of aftershocks, and basically a traumatic devastation in Japan back in the days. And this earthquake also triggered a tsunami that arrived in Hawaii a few hours later. Basically, wow. I think maybe 11 or 12 hours later, it arrived at the shorelines of Hawaii, and also destroyed some of the infrastructure around the shores. But also the earthquake waves, they traveled basically through. They traveled all around the globe, right, multiple times, because it was such a big earthquake. But they were recorded on the network of Kilauea. And usually, if you have an eruption at this volcano, then the stress field changes, and there's also stress building up. And it is not very rare that it's accompanied by, on volcanic scales, bigger earthquakes. On volcanic scales, earthquakes are usually not that big in magnitudes, but there is energy of about 4-point or 5-point magnitude earthquakes stored in a volcanic edifice after an eruption like this. So basically, we felt an earthquake that night. That was a 4-point earthquake, it turned out. And that was an earthquake that was basically associated with the eruption that had just ended. But at the same time, uh, a roommate of mine, he got a warning on his phone that this big Tohoku earthquake had happened. So
Wow.
lots of things happened in coincidence. So basically, you cannot link the earthquake in Japan to the volcanic eruption in Hawaii, but things just happened all at the same time. So it was just such an exciting, geophysically exciting time to be at the observatory. In these days. So it was lots of activity going on, and so we had earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tsunamis and all of this happening at the same time. And we were basically just very young and unexperienced, but lucky enough to be in the middle of it.
I took a look at your Google Scholar. You also teach in Germany. Are you a professor assistant? I forgot the exactly word, but do you teach in Germany as well?
Yes, 2 years ago I started what would be the German word is a junior professorship. The American word would be more like an associate professorship. So basically, I have the full responsibility of a professor, but I'm still in an evaluation phase. So my position is tenured, means I'm gonna have a full professorship in a few years' time if I perform well. But I have this whole list of things to check off before I qualify to be a full professor. But meanwhile, I have to do the teaching, I have to do the management, and I have to do the research. And all of this will basically be a qualification for full professorship.
And you also do travels, right? You have recently got back from Zavodovski, if I don't mispronounce it now. Zavo is a sweet way to refer to one of the islands in the South Sandwich Island. So tell us about your experiences there last year when we met, because we met on the way. We stopped in South Georgia because of bad weather, so we had to wait. And then we fortunately met at Larsen Fjord. You were on board Vinson. I was on board Golden Fleece. So tell us a bit about your two trips, this one recently and the last year, Nicole.
Yeah, with this story, I've been extremely lucky because I got to go twice in 1 year to a place where basically no one ever sets foot on, like to a very, very remote, small active volcanic island in the Southern Ocean, which is called Zavodovski or Savo. And it's the northernmost of these 9 active volcanoes, 11 islands, 9 of them being active volcanoes. And it's a small subduction zone where basically 2 oceanic plates meet and one subsides below the other, causing these beautiful volcanoes to grow. They are fairly young, and we know almost nothing about them because other than in Hawaii, we do not have any ground-based monitoring system installed there. So all we know about these volcanoes is from satellite imagery and very rare visits. And now last year we went twice, both times on Vinson of Antarctica. And the way this works is basically that many scientists from many very different fields of science group together for a joint venture. And it's very interdisciplinary. So I went as the only volcanologist with a team of penguinologists and terrestrial scientists and glaciologists to basically study this volcano, and of course the penguins and everything that comes with it. Because also coincidentally, this active volcano Savo or Zavodovski Island and the active volcano Mount Asphyxia or Mount Curry on it hosts the largest penguin colonies on Earth. So talking about chinstrap and Macroni penguins, there are millions of them breeding every year. And of course, they are also an interesting target for scientists to look at, for conservation, but also for penguin counts and their behavior in general. So basically, these expeditions make us team up and work very interdisciplinary, and then also find new things that we would never think of because we are so stuck normally in our own worlds, like me looking at the volcano only and them looking at penguins only, and that we would never actually mix applications. But through this interdisciplinary approach, for instance, I can now see penguins on satellite imagery. And I'm not talking about optical satellite imagery because this has been published before, but I'm talking about radar imagery. So that's basically satellites that use microwave wavelengths, longer wavelengths than optical. And they look at very different properties of penguins, not basically the, the color of the poo or the big nests. They look at scattering properties like their orientation towards the sensor and how they move and things like that. So more their shape and orientation, and yeah, so it's basically a full new technique to detect penguins, and it would never have been discovered without penguinologists and volcanologists or remote sensing people working together. So it's absolutely amazing to be part of this, and I have no idea how on earth I deserve to be going there twice a year. So this is very, very special.
How did you manage to be on board? How did you manage to be one of the team?
Actually, that's a very interesting question, because the first time around basically both times, I was hired as a consultant. So basically I was asked, because I have a lot of experience from my past jobs and working at observatories, not only in Hawaii, but also on La Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean for many years, and looking at eruptions and being part of eruptions, but also being sent in task force missions to erupting volcanoes in the Cape Verdes or the Canaries. So I've been at active volcanoes enough to have experience about activity signals and how to behave in the very, it's highly unlikely at Zavodovski, but it could still erupt. It's an active volcano. So in the case of an eruption, I'm trained in how to react and how to behave and how to stay safe for the whole team. So I basically went as a consultant. They asked me to be the volcano safety person on board both times, but as a paycheck, basically, I got in return to be allowed to do my own research, collect my own data. Yeah, just be part of the science team.
How did you deal with the navigation? Like, do you get seasick? Was it easy for you? Were you before on board? Was your first time sailing?
This was the first time ever in my life on a sailboat.
Wow.
Back in January last year. And I've been enjoying it extremely. I'm very lucky to not be motion sick mostly, so not on helicopters, usually not in the car, or where people usually get motion sick, and therefore also not on Vinson, even though it's a small sailing vessel and it's rough seas. So I've been lucky enough to not be extremely sick. But the first time was definitely a little more smooth than the second time around. So now in December, the sea was even rougher because we had lots of storms, big storm systems in the Southern Ocean, which made it extremely hard for us to also get ashore and work on the island and also collect the type of data that we needed. But also the sailing was a lot more rough, and everybody got sick except the crew and me, luckily. But it doesn't mean, I didn't, that means I didn't throw up, but it also doesn't mean that I didn't feel horrible for some of the time. So I still felt pretty off for a long time sailing. So
to be selected for a job like this, to be selected in a very, very special mission like that, do you apply or somebody calls you? How exactly did that happen for you?
For the mission on Zavodovski, you mean?
Yeah.
That is through networking and connections. I had been down to the South Sandwich Islands once before on a large German research icebreaker vessel, Polarstern. And back in the days, I didn't get ashore. The science time was basically too short for me to collect the data that I wanted. And because you have to go through all the permission process with the government of South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, they kind of keep you in the loop with any future cruises that go down there, because they are interested in to support the scientists and the science work, and they basically keep an eye out on, everybody who's technically or basically interested in the area of the South Sandwich Islands. And whenever there is a next cruise going, they team them up. So this is how they got me connected to Tom Hart, who is a penguinologist from Oxford. And he then invited me to come as the second penguinologist on the Vinson trip to basically do research together and to team up. So I was invited, and then the first endeavor basically led to the second, because then I was experienced. I had been to Zavodovski. I had some base data to share that made the planning way more easy. So then it's experience. So first it's luck and networking, and then it's experience that basically gets you in.
And during the crossing, because I think, did you do that last year? You flew to the Falkland Islands, and then you started off from the Falklands, from Stanley, sailing roughly like a week to South Georgia and then onwards. Did you participate in the watch? How was the daily life on board?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Vinson of Antarctica crew is doing a great job in involving everybody, and everybody who wants to learn something about sailing or who wants, hands-on and participate is very highly welcome. So there is a watch system, and everybody is on the watch system. So you have a routine of, the first time it was 3 hours on, 6 hours off, and then 3 hours on again. And the second time it was 4 hours on during the day and 8 hours off. And then during the night, it was 3 hours on and then 6 hours off. So a little bit of a changing system, but it very much gives you a routine, and it gives your day a structure. It gives you a reason to get up, even though you feel horrible. And and it also connects you with all the sailing duties, and you're involved in the cooking down in the galley, and it keeps everybody entertained, and also basically networking, talking, connecting. We've been playing lots of games, doing our watches, and otherwise you're just, blown away by the sheer fact that you're in the middle of the ocean with 10 other people on board. So a very, very small group of people out there just basically depending and relying on each other. And your duty is to watch for icebergs, to not hit them, and to look at the weather conditions, and to just get excited and prepared for your landing and for your time ashore. So it's amazing. Also because you get to see not only icebergs but all the wildlife down there, which is incredible. And then you also get to sail around South Georgia quite a bit, and into, for instance, Larsen Harbor, where we met. And then, by pure coincidence, there is this second, small boat, and the teams connect and visit each other and share glasses of wines, and it's just, it's what keeps me alive in the long run, really. Exactly, these experiences, amazing people you meet, really legends and characters, and it's very rewarding.
Jerome was telling me one time that the amount of things we did over 2 months would be necessary at least a year to process everything. It's so much beauty, so many experiences, and it doesn't just it's not really quickly absorbed. Like, I'm still processing. I totally agree with that on here, because it's just super special. It's such a unique chance in life, I think.
Absolutely. I'm home now physically, but really my heart and my mind and everything, my heart, like everything is just kind of lacking behind is kind of still down south and observing and digesting all of the experiences. That I can definitely sign that.
When you disembarked, when you arrived there and you went ashore, and I also remember Jerome saying that he helped Skip to spot. I mean, to get, because it's very difficult to land. It's a very tricky spot. You have to use lines to go ashore, and the seas are not necessarily like a swimming pool. Actually, the opposite. And he was saying that he shared some information with Skip, the exact point for going ashore. How did it work for you? How long were you ashore? How was the work exactly once you disembarked from Vinson? This time, for example, let's talk about this most recent one, the second trip.
Yeah, so it's really what we call Jerome's landing, because he found it and he explained it to Skip how to find it back and where it is and how it all works. It's a place where the currents come together in a way that the waves cancel each other out. So it's kind of a safe spot for the dinghy to arrive, but it's really a high cliff. And so basically Skip goes ashore first as the expedition leader, and he puts a rope and he throws the rope down and puts some knots in there for everybody else to basically climb along the rope, which makes it way more easier because everything is so slippery and you're in a big flotation suit. This time we were actually in a dry suit. And you have these mud boots on, and it's like everything but climbing equipment where you're very mobile and you can just delicately like climb in a proper way. But no, you feel like an elephant in that big gear, and then you're supposed to climb this very slippery cliff. But yeah, no incidents happened, neither the first time nor the second time. Everybody made it ashore safely, and all the equipment came along. So we had 60 or 80 bags,
Wow.
each of them weighing like 20 or 30 kilos. It's a lot of equipment. We were 6 people ashore this time, supposed to be 10, but unfortunately our crew decreased a little bit because of other issues that would be too much to talk about now. But we were 6 people ashore this time and 8 people the last time. That also means we need tents for everybody. We need a tent for all the drones and the batteries to recharge. So basically everything to the data and all of this, the computers staying dry and safe and being recharged. But then tents for the people, that means food and water and gas has to come ashore. And then lots of safety equipment, all the first aid gear, all the instruments, and all the clothing and everything you might need for a 10 to almost 3 weeks trip. So we are prepared to stay ashore for 3 weeks, basically. Also, we bring extra tents in case that one of the camp gets destroyed in a big storm or, like heavy weather event, which actually happened this time. So we came ashore, we built our camp 1, and on day 2 it was destroyed, so that we had to build our camp 2 further down in the cliffs where there is like lots of runoff. In a rain event, it would basically make us get stuck in the mud and all the penguin poo and all the runoff. That actually and very luckily didn't happen. So we had a second camp which was more protected from the wind, less protected from the runoff. And then on day 3 we actually started doing science, right? So the first 2 days we're building camp 1 and then getting down camp 1 and building camp 2 and basically staying safe and surviving, right? So it is a true adventure, climbing that cliff, arriving there with a dinghy, but everything works like clockwork. The Vinson of Antarctica crew is so experienced. They know exactly what they're doing. Everything is really safe. So despite all the logistical challenges and the difficulties of getting ashore, the Vinson of Antarctica crew, they're so well trained. Everything just feels very safe. They operate the dinghy and they stay with the boat. They stay very close. So we always have basically a fallback option. It feels, even though it's the most adventurous type of expedition I've ever been part of, because it's so remote and we're like there all by ourselves, but everything is just well prepared. There is a risk assessment in place. We have all the protective gear. We have all the first aid kit and the training. So we are truly basically relying on each other with our lives, but very safely so, because everybody is just in the right mindset and in the right, condition and type of training. And so everything is, works like clockwork, actually.
And how long did you stay this time on the island?
This time we were initially planning to stay for almost 3 weeks, but because of the bad weather conditions, we only managed 6 days between two very big storm systems. So when the first storm system arrived, we were still in South Georgia. So we rushed down to southern Thule, which is the southernmost island of the South Sandwich Islands. And there we waited in the eye of a storm that was as big as the entire Southern Ocean, basically. So it basically extended from South America to Antarctica, almost to South Africa. And we were in the eye, very safe. That day they measured actually 70 or 80 knots gusts at Kritviken or KAP in South Georgia. And we were there down in southern Thule, basically in a small caldera between two volcanoes, and we couldn't find any anchor that was safe enough. There is an anchor to the south outside of the caldera. It's called Ferguson Bay, but we tried there and it was too windy for us to anchor. So we went back into the caldera and were basically drifting downwind and then motoring back up. And basically we're measuring this entire caldera, basically going up and down the caldera for a full night. Then we went to Ferguson Bay and anchored, waited for a full day. The night again, we were back in the caldera, drifting. And then the weather had cleared in the north enough for us to take the trip. It was a day-long sail all the way north to Zavodovski to actually attempt the landing in smoother conditions. So we landed in very smooth conditions. It was the only day when we actually saw the summit of the volcano, and we couldn't fly drones, obviously, because we were busy landing and building camp. And then the next small storm system arrived, basically destroying our camp. And before the next bigger system arrived, we had to evacuate the island just because it's then too dangerous to stay. This time the weather conditions only allowed for 6 days ashore, 4 of which were science days. So 4 of which were actually days where we were out and about collecting data, but of course from the first daylight to sunset, right? Like we used every single minute that we could get to collect the data that we were aiming to get.
So I have a very silly question. What do you guys eat on the island? How do you organize yourselves in terms of food, and how is your routine when you're not working?
So luckily, Skip is in charge of this, and Skip is a very, very experienced expedition leader. He's been on so many, like off the map, off the beaten path adventures that he knows exactly how to calculate portions and how to make it nice. And so therefore we had basically cereals in the morning with a little bit of powdered milk, tea and coffee, and then snacks during the day, basically cheese and crackers and salami and nuts and chocolate and all of this. And then in the night, in the evening, we would cook a meal. And this was something from, pasta con niente, pasta with nothing. Or, but also very sophisticated meals like risotto al funghi, including the white wine sauce. So we also, whenever the weather allows, the boat can come. Basically, the crew from the boat, they come ashore and they resupply us with anything we need, And this might be, for instance, a bottle of RW, which is short for red wine, to anything that we run out of. So it's actually very, very comfortable, and we eat so well that probably everybody who threw out, who threw up and puked out their guts doing the sailing. everybody gained back their weight. Also because the island is so small, it only takes 2 hours to hike from one end to the very other end of the island. So you never get enough exercise for the amount of food you eat. So it's very, very comfortable.
And how do you call the bottle of wine on the radio, to not to mention that you were saying alcohol? Like, what is the code?
Exactly, RW. We order a bottle of RW.
So in case there is a vessel passing by and listen to the same frequency.
Which actually never happens. So we are the only people in thousands of nautical miles around the island. So there is really no one else, not even fishing vessels that time around. So sometimes you have some fishing vessels around, but we're the only souls. It's just for our fun to invent codes on the radio for deliveries like these.
I remember when we went when we went on board to visit you guys, when we were both in Lassen last year in South Georgia. Skip was making pancakes for everyone when we went to the...
Yes. Yes, absolutely. There's, that the food on Vinson is so great. There is, shepherd's pie, and there is big Christmas dinners. There is lots of meat all the time. We have mutton, for instance, from the Falklands, all types of fish. And so the food is just absolutely amazing. There's pancakes in the mornings, or eggs, or whatever whatever you can imagine. Really, we lack nothing. And even there is like in the bow, they store all the vegetables. And whenever Mariana goes to fetch the vegetables from the bow, she goes like, "I'm going to the market. I'm going to talk to the market lady and see what she's got today." So there's even a market on the boat, and there is a butcher, which is more stern, and it's fun. It's absolutely stunning to be on board Vinson. And very, very professionally run, really.
And since you were talking about the boat, it's a fairly new boat. What can you tell about her, like general information on the vessel? What do you remember?
Yeah, so Vinson of Antarctica, I think, is 2 or 3 years old now. It's built in the Netherlands by a company called KM Yacht Builders. And it's a pelagic 77 vessel. And I think Skip owns the trademark for the pelagic vessels. He has his own little pelagic, and he also sold, I think, pelagic Australis, which is another, expedition vessel, but he sold it to Greenpeace, I think. So basically, the whole concept of how it's done, and it's a schooner. So also how it's designed is basically designed by Skip. And I think Tony Castro, a guy from KM Yacht Builders. So but the ideas, they come from Skip. So, and he talks it through with the architects and basically yacht builders. And so it's really, really thought through. It gained so much from Skip's experience, basically a lifetime of expeditions to the polar regions. And it is very, very efficiently designed, very comfortable. So whenever you're on the boat, you feel just like at home. It has enough space. It's comfortable. It's cozy. It feels very safe. Everybody knows where their life vests are, and everybody gets introduced to all types of safety procedures on the boat. And when you're down there in these extreme weathers and extreme sea conditions, only basically opening the little door between the pilot house and the cockpit and stepping 1 foot outside basically tells you how different of a world this is. Everything cozy and nice and warm and basically a home inside the boat, inside the yacht. But then as soon as you step outside, it's a world that it could immediately kill you. Basically, it only takes minutes for you to be exposed to these extreme weather conditions to actually get killed. So if you went overboard, or if some accident happened, the yacht hits an iceberg and sinks, and we have to go in the lifeboats, how ridiculously hostile this environment out there is. So the ship basically does a great job in giving you the illusion that you're absolutely safe out there. and so does the crew, because they're experts. They are legends in sailing. They've been doing this their entire lives. They are so experienced. I mean, they're the world best sailors, actually. So Skip comes from the racing world, and so does Chris, our skipper at the time, but everybody else basically worked their lives long. They worked on yachts and on charters of sailing vessels. So everybody knows exactly what they're doing. So yeah, the ship is the Vinson of Antarctica is extremely, extremely well done and very comfortable to live on. Has a lot of character. Is very, very pretty. She's super pretty. If you look at her from outside, it's this aluminium boat, and it looks so professional. It's designed for these extreme conditions in the polar regions, and it's run just very professionally. And I know it's sailing under a Chilean flag, because everything is basically financially run by a guy from Santiago who just basically provides the money, but he is very, into the whole concept of teaching young Chileans how to sail. So there's lots of sailing schools going on, but also basically giving people the experience and supporting science and all of this. So it's a very good concept, actually, of making this work, and lots of people involved, the crew and the team, many of them based in Barcelona, I think, many of them based in Catalonia in Spain, and basically the financial support coming from, and also the flag and the name and all of this coming from Santiago, from Chile, and basically the experience coming from Skip and the team. So it's a really, really well run concept.
So just to clarify, Skip still owns the boat, or he's sold to a Chilean person? How is the ownership at the moment? Do you know?
No, the ownership is with the guy in Santiago. Okay. So it's owned by the person in Chile, and they are also building a second boat now. So basically, Vincent is going to have a sister vessel, which is built exactly the same. It's built in the same shipyard in the Netherlands, and it's also going to be employed in the south and in the north, basically in the polar regions. It's basically just running so well, and they have so many requests for charters and cruises, also by film teams and by scientists and all of this. But also by schools, they run these sailing schools that they decided to build a second one.
And size-wise, you said it's 77 feet. Or is it how big is it?
Yes,
77.
Yeah, okay. It's a pelagic 77, so it's 77 feet long.
Okay.
Yeah, it fits 14 people or maximum 16. So it's actually really roomy. It has a big saloon, and it has enough cabins, and yeah, it's a space wonder.
You were mentioning about the chartering part of the vessel, because I remember last year there was a team of Netflix doing some footages on a documentary on penguins. I forgot exactly what was the topic. Was there any team this year chartering the boat apart from the science side or not, or just science full on?
So yeah, exactly. The first trip was basically for a Netflix documentary, which I can't talk much about because it's still not out. It's supposed to come out early this year, so around that time, but it's still very confidential. So I can't really talk about what they were doing exactly. But this time it was actually a charter by the British Antarctic Survey. So the British Antarctic Survey fundraised third-party funding, basically a research fund to do conservational work, biological studies in the South Sandwich Islands. But it was also co-financed by a small film team, also based in the UK, and they couldn't come in the end. So it was decided very short notice that they get pulled out of this cruise because of the avian flu. So at this point in time, we were not sure whether the avian flu would have had arrived on Zavodovski already, if a landing was even possible. Like there were so many uncertainties that the film team, they decided to focus on the Falkland Islands for their filming, because this way they could make sure they get some footage, even though not of Zavodovski Island and the big colonies there, but just to basically outweigh the risk of, basically sailing for weeks and weeks and then getting no footage, as opposed to getting some footage, even though it's not the greatest footage they were trying to get on Zavodovski. So that happened. The film team was pulled out. Otherwise, it would have been basically this like a small film team, but mainly a scientific cruise from the British Antarctic Survey.
And use of drones, is it part of your work too, right? How does it happen exactly when you are on land, on the island?
Absolutely, it's part of my work. So I had a big, basically mapping project going on. The first time I went, I only brought a small drone, which is designed to do photogrammetric surveys. So basically, it's a mapping drone. And by applying photogrammetry, where you basically collect data with a lot of overlap, you collect pictures, not film, not a movie, but pictures with a lot of overlap, like 70% in flight direction and then 60% with adjacent flight paths. So you have like a very fine pattern and you collect data of the entire island. And this basically gives you the data to calculate a topographic model. So you have, of each point on the ground, you have multiple look angles, and through these multiple look angles, you can find the elevation of the point with respect to the other points. So the first survey basically was a drone-based mapping survey. We get like an orthomosaic, but also a topographic map of the entire island in centimeter accuracy. So basically, no satellite application can deliver this type of data so accurately, especially also because it's influenced by cloud cover, and with drones we're way closer to the ground, right? So we're not as affected by the clouds unless they're hanging very low. And then I also brought different sensors for a bigger drone. So basically a thermal sensor and a hyperspectral sensor and a laser scanner. So basically all types of different remote sensing instruments to collect scientific data across the whole island. So for instance, the thermal sensor helps the penguinologist because the penguins are warm in a cold surrounding, so they stick out as little warm dots on the ground. But for volcanologists, of course, the crater area is hot, and there are some fumarolic areas, so where the ground, where there is a small like degassing patches, cracks in the ground, fumaroles that are very hot. Or at least warmer than the surrounding. So you can see lots of, structure and cracks and all of this type of information that you would never see in pure photographs. So this is a type of data that we collect using drones.
I remember one thing that I was thinking, I was wishing to ask you. It has nothing to do with the work itself. It's just one fun moment in South Georgia, because you had last year the polar plunge when you guys were waiting for a good weather, and we followed you guys by the on board Golden Fleece. We did that too, quickly, like as fast as possible. How was it for you guys? How was the sensation to go into water? And do you ever go in the water? Do you have a swim over Zavodovski, or is it completely impossible through the weather conditions?
Yeah, unfortunately, Zavodovski doesn't really have beaches or anything, and then all the currents and everything is unknown, so it would probably be too dangerous down there in the open ocean. So we didn't take a polar plunge at Savo, but sure enough, we polar plunge when we are in South Georgia, and there's also all these lakes, and it's freezing cold water, but it's so refreshing, and it wakes you up, and it awakens all the life in your body, and then once you get out of the water, you have like the skin feels very peaky, so it itches everywhere, and it's a great sensation. And I remember one of the crew of Vinson. He's he's a South African, and he's a surfer. He's very young. And he, the first time I met him was before the first cruise at the airport. And I had like these big bags, 3 big bags of, equipment and drones and polar gear and all of this. And he had like this little bag, like this little duffel bag. And I asked him what's inside and how he manages to have almost no luggage. And he goes like, yeah, that's just my wetsuit. So all he ever brings is his wetsuit down south. I mean, they are equipped by Vinson, everything he needs for work he has on the yacht already. So, but whenever he gets the chance, he would jump in the water and he would swim like a dolphin. So he gets to swim quite a bit. But of course, it's colder temperatures than he's used to, so he brings a thicker wetsuit than normal.
I just remember, Nicole, because we took the same flight from Punta Arenas to Stanley in the Falkland. I remember, because I didn't know the people I was going to travel with on board Golden Fleece, so I saw you guys at the airport. I just remember that in Punta Arenas prior to taking the last leg of plane. And I saw you too. I thought maybe they are the French ones, because I was supposed to see some French people that would be in the same trip with Jerome. And I saw you too, and I thought maybe they are the two. And no, they don't look French. And then I heard this guy speaking English. I said, no, that's not definitely not them. And then 2 seconds later, I was queuing to board the last plane. These 3 people come to me and say, Marina. So they were actually the people that I would know, and Sarah, Greg, and Sophie. But I do remember seeing you and Tom, or Tor. Tor, yeah.
Tor.
I remember seeing you too, and I thought maybe it's them. But then we saw again later, like weeks later in South Georgia, and I was like, I know these guys. It's like such a small world. It was so funny.
It's such a small world. I do remember that we were on the same plane. I do remember this actually.
Yeah.
And then meeting you again down there on Golden Fleece, that was just magic. Yeah, of course. I also didn't know who I was actually traveling with. I met most of the people for the very first time when I came down there, so it could have been a different mix, right? We could have been on a boat together. Next time, maybe, Marina, we should plan for something.
Skip, if you're listening to this episode, Skip, please. Brazilians on board.
Yeah. This is our official application to go back.
And have you ever been to volcanic islands in the South Pacific, like Vanuatu or Tonga, with that massive situation that happened and damaged a lot of the country? Have you been in that part of the world?
Unfortunately not. I've been to New Zealand, but only as a tourist. Also the northern island of New Zealand, where they have volcanoes. But otherwise, no, the South Pacific is very unknown to me, and I would love to go. And I know, you have to sail there, so it would be another absolutely stunning destination for our sailing trips.
There is a volcano in Vanuatu and on Tana Island that you can visit, the open crater. as a German, I think he would be shocked with the lack of security because it's so improvised. Like it's super easy to access. You just like do a few minute walk up to the crater. But I don't know if there's been some changes from the time I was there in 2019. End of 2019. We stopped there sailing, and then we got to go. It's a bit touristic, but it's incredible experience. But I remember there were like wooden pole as a barrier defense. So when you, not even helmet, nothing. And I was like, oh, this is a bit improvised. But the experience was...
Is it Umbrum volcano? Is it the one with the lava lake?
No, it's a Tana. It's a further south.
Tana.
Further south, yeah. Umbrum. We did go to Umbrum, but we didn't get to hike the volcano though. But we went to Tana, and it's a pretty crazy experience, but completely improvised, like security-wise. It's so. Diego, my partner, he got. Some ashes, I think, and he had like days later destroyed eyes because of the ashes going, and it was pretty wild experience, but amazing landscape, really incredible. No, so really,
it's beautiful landscapes created by volcanoes. But these lesser monitored volcanoes with frequent eruptions. Of course, it's not without a risk getting close if you don't have any further information on them. But eruptions are still, for the short amount of time that you're spending there, they're highly unlikely. So it's great places to enjoy, even though ashes are actually volcanic class. So the composition is, they contain lots of silica, which is glass. So they have sharp edges, and it can actually, cut your little, cut the little veins in your eyes. And also if you breathe it in, it can actually destroy the lungs from inside. So ashes are always to be, you need to be careful. And for these occasions, we would bring, sealed goggles and also kind of protective masks to basically not breathe any of this. I've experienced lots of ash in La Palma in October 21. But luckily not on Savo, and unfortunately not on Vanuatu because I've never been.
I imagine in a place like the South Sandwich Islands, you said it's very unlikely to happen something like you're prepared for some situation, unexpected situation. Does the wild environment compromises? Like, does it make harder to happen something tragic, or how can the environment impact on that kind of volcano? I mean, the geography of the Southern Ocean, how can that make an effect?
Well, the geography, these volcanoes are very exposed in the ocean, and you have these very characteristic westerly winds. So any eruption that would produce an ash plume would absolutely be directed, downwind. So you could easily escape the majority of the ash just because it follows these strong winds quite fast. But otherwise, because of the subduction zone, which is close by the trench, it produces lots of large magnitude earthquakes, actually. So it's not uncommon for a 5-point-something magnitude earthquake to happen in the close proximity of the islands. And when you're on the island, me as a volcanologist, I cannot really distinguish. So I would feel a shaking, right? But I couldn't really tell whether it was something that is shallow and within the volcanic edifice, or whether it's further away and deeper in the trench. So what I did is I had colleagues here in Germany who would look at the earthquake catalog, and whenever there is a big event in the trench recorded on remote stations, the stations are in South Africa and in South America and in Antarctica, but these big earthquakes, they send signals to all these remote stations, while the small signals from the volcano, they would not be picked up at these remote stations. So whenever there's a big earthquake, I get an in-reach message with the magnitude and the location and the depth and the mechanism and all the information that I need to basically decide that the earthquake that I felt on the island was something in the trench and not connected to the volcano. But this is really, this is the least of the security measures that you can take, that you can have. So this is the minimum information, because we are just lacking ground stations, and therefore, if the volcano is waking up and sending signals, we are not actually in the place to receive these signals and to interpret them correctly. So we would have to take action upon anything that happens. But of course, we take all the, I have a gas monitor, and we have the gas masks, and we have helmets, and we have the goggles, and worst case, right, you would probably feel the earth shaking, and if there is a dike approaching the surface, if there's magma basically close to the surface, you would start feeling tremors, and you would start smelling the fumes, and then you could just evacuate the island.
And Nicole, I have just 2 more questions. If you're still free, if you can handle 2 more questions, too many I've done already, but if it's okay.
Absolutely, go ahead. I've been talking too much anyways, and probably also going in too much depth with all of this. So.
No, it's lovely to hear. It's it's super nice. I thought about asking, have you been to Italy, right? I remember you mentioned you've been to Italy, in some volcanoes in Italy. How were these experiences?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been to Italy. I've actually worked at INGV in Pisa quite a bit. And I've been to, Vesuvius and Napoli and Ischia and many other places, also Sicily, of course, and Mount Etna and the observatory in Catania. And I've never made it to Stromboli, unfortunately, or Volcano, but it's still on the list. It's an amazing place. It's, Etna, for instance, also is one of the best monitored volcanoes that we have. There is, Kilauea in Hawaii, there is Piton de la Fournaise, there is Etna, there's many volcanoes that we monitor quite well, but Etna is one of them, and therefore we know a lot about Etna, as opposed to Zavodovski, where we almost have no information, right? But from these volcanoes, also with their many eruptions and their high level of activity, you get so much information and so much signals to learn from that, those are our volcanologists' favorite volcanoes to study, just because there is so much information, so much to gather knowledge from.
So I have 2 questions in one, just to complete our chat. This first one, right? Because in the future, you're super welcome to come back anytime and share more experiences about your super inspiring work. So 1 in 2, right? Or 2 in 1. Do you have any tradition or any habit prior to when you arrive close to a volcano? Because the volcano represents a lot in a lot of culture, like the way they respect. I remember Vanuatu people saying how much they respect as a sort of a spirit. Is much more than really just a mountain, like an iconic mountain. So I'd like to know first if you have any habit or any thing that you do before walking when you arrive in the location. And then the last one really is, what have you learned since you started sailing that has contributed to your work as a volcanologist?
Oh, that's 2 very interesting, very different and personal questions that are not easy to answer. Starting with the first, a ritual when I arrive at a volcano.
Thank you so much for listening to another chat here on Maré Sonora podcast. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you'd like to check out the entire conversation, there are many possibilities. You can check them all on the website www.podcastmaresonora.com. I will also leave the link directly in the show's notes, so you can click on there and go through the best option. If you choose to listen to the podcast on Spotify, you can directly subscribe through there. And the good thing is, not only you have access to this chat, but to all of the complete episodes that have been already launched. So not only 1, but more than 20 available. Another possibility is contribute through YouTube, and then I will forward you the link through your email. Pick the one that suits you better, and I'll be very happy to hear your thoughts and what you thought about this chat. I see you soon, and until then, fair winds to all of you. Muito obrigada por chegar até aqui e conferir mais um podcast do Mara Sonora. Se você quiser conferir o episódio até o final, completo, existem várias formas, várias alternativas para apoiar e participar. Recentemente eu disponibilizei um mecanismo de assinatura diretamente no Spotify. Funciona super fácil, você pode acessar diretamente na plataforma, clicar no episódio pago e aí você vai ter toda a orientação por e-mail para participar. A assinatura no Spotify te dá direito a aproveitar não só esse episódio de hoje, como todos os outros já lançados. São mais de 20 para você aproveitar. Para quem preferir fazer uma contribuição via Pix, a chave Pix do Mara Sonora é podcastmarasonora@gmail.com. Nesse caso, é fundamental que você coloque na mensagem do Pix o seu e-mail e qual episódio quer ouvir, que aí em até um dia eu reencaminho para você o link e você confere pelo YouTube. Outras alternativas de apoiar e participar aqui no Mara Sonora estão disponíveis no site www.podcastmarasonora.com. Acesse a seção Apoie e escolhe a melhor opção para você. Lá você vai conferir também o nome de todas as pessoas que já apoiaram, a quem eu agradeço demais. A gente se vê então no próximo episódio e eu desejo a todos vocês, como sempre, bons ventos.